Morning, I'm Alex. I'm an alcoholic.
So bad, Alex.
It's very good to be back here, see some familiar faces. I used to live in Worcester. I left in like 2009, and so it's really good to be back at this meeting and see it's really flourishing. Thanks for asking me to speak. Talk about my experience with faith and like in this reading. I came into AA in 2005. I was 19, and I had a whole bunch of bias. I had a lot of alcoholic experience and a whole lot of bias. Like the last 4 months of my drinking, I'll zip through it. I had these series of experiences where I was honestly trying my best to stop drinking, and I was completely unable to do so. And that would later set me up to kind of faith. But like I would go a day or two, I would swear off, I would quit, I would go a day or two, and then I would find it necessary to drink again, even though I didn't want to. I was trying to clean up my life. I was trying to move forward in like academics and my career, and each time my brain would tell me that it was okay to drink. Like one night I told myself I could drink wine. Sometimes I'd just be hanging around my friends. I remember one night I did that, and just no turned to yes. Like something changed in my brain without anybody twisting my arm. And like once I started that night, I had to get hammered. Like I needed to continue. And other experiences like that where I'd be pacing, and I'd try to make the decision myself, but I was completely unable. And like in the first, I read one of the early chapters. We're coming here, and it, I think the idea is to convince me that I'm alcoholic. And so the first paragraph of this chapter is really just a concise explanation of what it is to be an alcoholic, and I think about it a lot when, and it's how I sort of understand my illness. It's how I sort of learned about my illness when I came in, and that's the idea that I'm an alcoholic if one of two conditions, like I can't keep from putting alcohol in my body, or once I start, I can't control the amount I take. So that's what I was going on. And the last day of my drinking, I took another drink without even thinking about it, and I felt crushed. Like I started to understand the failure of my self-reliance, and I felt really scared and alone. And I ended up running into a friend of mine who had gotten sober, kind of skipping around, but I ended up running into a friend of mine who had gotten sober in AA 4 months, and he had this sort of glow about him. And they talk in here about sort of the example of the people around us, the living example, and how important that is to see it working, and also how important it is to be approached by another alcoholic, someone who's lived that experience. That's how the confidence can be established and how I can begin to get better. But until then, I can't, because in the early chapters it talks about doctors' medicine is good, but it can't cure alcoholism. It can't help alcoholics. And I know personally, I didn't really get very far seeing professionals until I came to AA and was approached by another alcoholic. But anyway, this paragraph in the first few chapters helped me understand why it was that I was drinking. And so that last day of my drinking career, God willing, I was completely crushed. Like I knew that I was in trouble. I'd always assumed that I could rely on myself, but at that moment I understood that I was in over my head, and I was really scared. And I called this kid who had been in AA because I felt he'd understand. I personally think, God, my higher power put him in my life. And anyway, that began my journey, and I'd been to AA prior, but so I had sort of spent my teenage years I grew up in a religion that was, I didn't have any strong negative experiences. I wasn't seized with, religious fervor. I grew up in a Reform and then conservative, Jewish household. It's not that, doesn't make that big a difference. But I had a religious education, and I sort of started to explore and question, and was like, in some sense, seeking as a kid, not too hard, but by the time I found alcohol, 15, 16, forget it. And in a short amount of time, I had this, the world figured out. I believed that God was an opiate for the masses, and it was all just some scheme to put money in people's pockets, and I felt so secure in my beliefs, and that I knew everything, and that was the kind of self-reliance that that would eventually fail me, permanently. But that's what I thought about religion, and they talk about in this reading these people who are violently anti-religious and bristle with antagonism, and I was definitely one of those people. I had it all figured out. It was linked with politics, and it was it was all garbage, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but so that's what I walked into AA with. But I had a unique open-mindedness. They talk about only in the last analysis that we can find our faith. Like, personally for me, that humbling administered by alcohol and the loss of my self-reliance and that crushing defeat, like that opened me up to be able to receive spiritual principles. And like I had this whole like evolution creationism debate going on in my head, and like the way it was presented, I was able to push aside sort of the bias and choose my own conception of a higher power. And what was a really important principle when I first came into AA was that I could choose my own conception of a higher power. And in the early chapters, it's really big on your conception, what you believe, your conception of God. And that was perfect for me because I am someone who bristles with antagonism. And if somebody had told me a particular conception, I mean, I can't say what would have happened, but I think it would have been harder for me to stomach. But in the first few chapters, and in Bill's story, it talks about, I'd be telling Bill, why don't you choose your own conception of a higher power? And for me, like that worked really well. I was able to push aside everything all that bias I came in with, and choose something personal to me, something I really hadn't done before, but the circumstances really demanded it. They make it clear in the first few chapters. It's the whole. Like, I think it's the whole point is to convince me if I'm an alcoholic, that I am an alcoholic. And I was able to, so they suggested in this literature at my first sponsor that I could choose my own conception of a higher power, and that was perfect for me. Whatever I wanted to believe, didn't have to agree with anybody else's conception. And that was all I needed, and they talk in the reading, like, that's all I needed to start my beginning. And they're huge on willingness. They say it over and over, honesty and willingness. And it's big, are you even willing to believe in a power greater than yourself? That's all we need to make our beginning. And fortunately for me, I was able to find that. And, they talk about how we're already faithful. I personally was an atheist, but it talks about, like, sort of to get us to see the light, like, the first couple chapters are, like, convincing me that I can't stop. I am an alcoholic, and I need something greater than myself, some kind of power greater than myself. And they ease me into it as they go into it until finally in, like, chapter 4, it's like, all right, we're confronted with the issue of faith. Here it is. Are you willing to believe or not? Like, is God is everything or he's nothing? But they really ease sort of the reader into God. The convincing, showing me that I'm already faithful, like that it doesn't make sense for me to reject this evidence. Like, there's evidence of people around me who are having their problems solved by God, and the whole issue of the bedevilments. Like, I know all about those. Like, for me, alcoholism didn't just go away when I stopped drinking. Like, it's very much a living thing for me. Like, if I'm not working the steps and trying to seek his higher power, I may be able to stay sober, but I'm going to continue to encounter the kind of problems with personal relationships and professional stuff that they talk about. And it talks about in this and other chapters how this is really spiritual principles solve all our problems. That it's not just about alcohol. I mean, first and foremost, it is about alcohol, but also, and there's a number of places where they say, all right, here's our point, let's tell a story. Here's our point, let's tell a story. And I know all about, personally for me, if things aren't going my way, faith is sometimes something that will go. If things really aren't going my way, I'm gonna say, God isn't here, and definitely they talk about calamity being a barrier to faith, and how our Southern friend, section of his story, how he had that experience, and but it wasn't, and sometimes I can feel that way. I'm relying on myself, things aren't going my way, God must be gone, but it talks, and I've started to notice this, it talks about the consciousness of our belief. The most important thing is the consciousness of our belief. And I like in his spiritual experience in this chapter, I think what they're saying is that God has always been around, but we become conscious of his presence. And it talks about how important that is. And I forget about that. It's not God that goes away. It's me that goes away from God. And it's reassuring. Every step I take towards God, God will take steps towards me. And my faith is a growing thing. I have to feed it regularly. I made that first connection when I first came into AA and was introduced to these principles. But I'm obligated, if I want to continue sort of rewards of this program, sobriety and spiritual sobriety, quality of life, that I'm going to have to continue to work at this thing and improve, perfect and improve my relationship with my higher power. and it's going to change over time. That's it. Thanks a lot, Jim. Thanks.
Hey, did you identify yourself?
Oh, no.
Can you do it?
I'm Alex, I'm an alcoholic. I've been through steps 1 through 8 as they're laid out in the big book, and I'm practicing 9 through 12 on a daily basis.
Thank you, Alex.